What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another podcast, another show. This week we're in week 11. Unfortunately, I'm not joined by my usual co-star Wajih because some life happens and he couldn't make it on the show today. But this will be a solo show and we'll try to keep it small and quick one. So just jumping straight into it, we had a good week 11. There were a lot of good matchups, but the biggest one that I'd really like to look at because it was a close 13-point game was Amar versus Ali Rizvi. This was definitely a close matchup. Like I said, it was 13 points differential, but Ali Rizvi's team just didn't perform how he probably normally would expect. Having players like Josh Allen and Mike Williams who would normally give him a lot of points, only accounting for 16 of his total 126 points. It also doesn't help that he had Devin Duvernay putting a 1.7 points. It's unfortunate because he had some big performances from some of his other running backs in Derrick Henry and Jamal Williams. A lot of credit should go to Amar. His team's been performing really well. He's on a pretty big win streak, I think, and he just piled on another one to go up to 7-4. Unfortunately, Ali Rizvi sitting at 4-7. Some close rankings, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the show. But yeah, just moving on. There were a lot of good performances this week. I feel like there were a lot of points scored. Most teams were actually playing fairly well. So just going straight into the studs and duds. For the studs, going through the QBs, some of the biggest performers this week include Joe Burrow, who put up a stat line of four passing touchdowns, 355 passing yards. He also had two interceptions. Patrick Mahomes also had a pretty big game. He put up 329 passing yards and three touchdowns. I mean, this guy is looking like the front runner for MVP this season. I'd be surprised if anything different were to happen. Especially how Josh Allen's been playing the last couple of weeks. A big surprise in the stud category this week was Jimmy G. He actually put up four passing touchdowns as well. Two to Ayuk and two to Kittle. I can definitely tell you that Salik would definitely be happy with those. Are you kidding me? Touchdowns. But yeah, some pretty big performances on the QB side. They're also a pretty interesting dynamic in terms of the top three running backs for this week. It's people you probably would not have expected, and they weren't even drafted very highly this year. Number one being Tony Pollard. I mean, he just went insane against the Vikings. He had 15 for 80. He also had six catches for 109 receiving yards and two touchdowns. He just couldn't be stopped, and like every throw, every play, just looked like he was gonna break a big one. Another big one was from Samaje Perine. I know Ali. This one hurt Ali a lot, especially seeing Joe Mixon go down early. But he put Samaje 3 Ryan as what you can call him because he had three receiving touchdowns on 52 receiving yards. He also had 11 for 30 on the ground, so not too much on the ground, but he was just killing him with the touchdowns. Three of the four from Joe Burrow. Another big surprise was Najee Harris. He had 20 carries for 90 yards and two touchdowns. He's finally stringing along some good performances. It begs the question as to whether or not he maybe was actually injured from that plate in his foot, and he's finally reaching the point where he's pretty healthy. Moving on to the wide receivers studs, we had a few. We had Adams, Amari Cooper, and Josh Palmer. Adams had a huge game again, showing that he's still one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver in the league. Putting up 7 for 141 and two touchdowns against the top corner right now, I think, in Pat Surtain. I mean, it's arguable, but he's definitely a top three corner right now. Amari Cooper also coming out with a big performance. This guy's been really bad on the road, but luckily they ended up playing in Detroit rather than Buffalo. So he had a good stat line of 8 for 113 and two touchdowns. Josh Palmer was another big surprise coming in at the top. I feel like there were a lot of surprises this week and who the studs were, at least for the running backs and receivers. Tight ends, that's a different story. But before we get to that, it was surprising because Ali Zedi had Josh Palmer in his starting lineup and decided to switch to MVS last minute as well as drop Josh Palmer, who put up a stat line of 8 for 106 and two touchdowns. He was actually looking like a stud and number one wide receiver that game. Yeah, and like I mentioned for tight ends, this is the dynamic it's always the same. You always expect the same people on top. Kelsey put up another huge performance, 6 for 115 and 3 touchdowns. This guy, I think he could even be the fantasy MVP of this season. He's just been doing that well. And another big performance from someone, that we haven't seen in a little while at the top was George Kittle. Having two of Jimmy Garoppolo's 4 touchdowns. He was 4 for 84 and 2 touchdowns, which is pretty nice. Moving into the duds for this week. Um, it's kind of hard to tell who the duds were. Just looking at most people's teams, if I feel like everyone's teams performed fairly well. Um, but I mean, there were a few that were pretty shocking and surprising. Like Farhan mentioned himself, Kadarius Toney. This man was being hyped up to be a stud this week, and I mean, his hamstrings are made of just glass. Like he got hurt again in the early in the game. Wasn't even able to catch a ball. He put up a solid 0 points. Another one was this one's a herder for me. This one, even though I won, it was still kind of shocking. Rondell Moore ended up getting hurt on the first play of the game and actually getting -6 rushing yards. So he had negative points, so he's definitely a dud. Um, One shocking thing, actually, I was seeing a lot on Twitter. People were complaining about how they were up by like a point and like the -0.6 points, or they weren't up a point. They were up like less than a point, like point 0.5, and Rondell Moore got them -0.6 points, and they end up losing that week. So I can definitely resonate with that, especially after the way I lost against Salik earlier this year by .02 points. So I mean, yeah, a few bigger names that were actually ended up being in the duds this week. Not that these guys aren't good, Kadarius Toney and Rondell Moore, but you don't expect big performances from them. But you do expect big performances from players like Saquon Barkley. This was a shocker, honestly. He was playing against the Lions, and you'd think this would be like a plus matchup, but he had 22 rushing yards and 13 receiving yards. So I mean that's something to look out for. Is he still a stud? I think Wajih would definitely comment and say he's still one of the MVPs in fantasy this season. But I don't know. I'm a little worried about what's going on with Saquon and just the Giants overall. I feel like they're on a downtrend. Another one that was not shocking, but just the way the game ended up going, Justin Jefferson just had a really bad game. He had 3 receptions for 33 yards. I mean, this is like the second or third game where Justin Jefferson has essentially not done much. So, like, even though in the beginning of the year I was thinking he'd go for 2K yards and be a really great player, he's still amazing, but he's proving to be human, not Superman like Derrick Henry or something, who's always consistent and always putting up points, or like Travis Kelsey. So I mean that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, that covers it for our studs and duds for the week. If I missed anyone, or you think someone else should be included on the list, feel free to throw a comment at me or just let me know. Yeah, so moving on, I thought this would be a cool time to discuss a little bit about the standings in our league. Since this is a solo podcast, I think it's a good time to break down what we're looking at and what we have going on right now. So just to run us through the list, as you can see here, you can follow along if you please. Yeah, I'm putting up the list right now. So we have this is our breakdown. Let's just start from 1 to 10. So we got Amar sitting at 1, Abbas surprise sitting at number 2. Then we have Ali at number 3, Wajih at number 4. That's also a shocker to me. I'm somehow sitting at number 5. I don't even know how. Salik number 6. I see that we have 3 Bass without the B teams. That's very interesting. So I couldn't tell you who this Bass without the B is, but if I were to guess, this would be Daniel at number 7. Number 8 is Ali Rizvi. Number 9 is the second Bass without the B. I think this is Farhan. And number 10, unfortunately, we have our number 3rd Bass without the B, Sami Himmati. Just looking at the standings, just look at this. Like, everyone is sitting with, like, within 3 games of each other. I mean, unfortunately, Sami is out of the race for playoffs, I'd say. But everyone besides that, it's just a close race. We have three teams here with 6 wins. We have three teams here with 7 wins, and we have one team with 5 wins and two teams with 4 wins, and obviously Sami with 3 wins. The point differentials and like how many points each team has scored is also so close and neck. I just feel like there's a very high chance what you see here, like what we've been seeing and discussing throughout the season, will not be what it is today. Or sorry, will not be what it is in the next few weeks when we actually approach playoffs. Um, I mean, for example, we have Ali sitting over here at 7-4 somehow and putting up 1,400 points, which is close to the bottom three of scoring. I think he's seventh in scoring. So this really goes to show how lucky you can get sometimes in fantasy. Um, but yeah, this is pretty cool to see. Unfortunately, like we have here as well, some people going on some pretty big losing streaks, like Ali Rizvi. He went in the opposite direction that I did. Since I've won 3 games in a row, he's lost the last four. I definitely resonate with that. I know how that feels. But seven. If you're at that 7 loss mark, you still have a chance to make it to the playoffs, and you shouldn't give up. Especially with the number of points you've put up, you're near the top five. Yeah, looking at some of these other teams, I mean, Salik also made a huge comeback from the start of the season, being at the bottom with me. We've slowly worked our way up, and the biggest surprise to me, honestly, is Wajih sitting here with like the most points scored, and it just seems like he's getting a lot of matchups where he's getting a lot of points scored on him as well, and he just ends up losing. But he's a team I feel like you have to fear right now just because of who he has on his team and like how stacked it is. I also need to mention Amar's team, who's been playing really well. He did have one loss last week, but he had put up a pretty big win streak. Let's see if he can continue to perform well. I mean, he drafted really well. I don't think he put in many trades, but it just seems like his team has been going in the right direction. We have some other names near the bottom, like Daniel, sitting at 5-6. He's 1 game behind, and he can really just hop up and take one of these spots that's closest to the playoffs. So I think there's some really key matchups coming up over the next weeks. So if we look here at the matchups, definitely a big one is me versus Saleh, because depending on this, someone's gonna fall and someone's gonna rise. Like depending on if Daniel ends up beating, I see two bats without the V's. I don't even know which one is which. I think yeah. So Daniel playing Farhan and Ali Rizvi playing Sami. So I mean, there's some close matchups, and then we have another high end teams playing each other. Ali Zaidi and Amar. This is going to be an interesting week because the standings are really going to get shaken up with this. I definitely can see Abbas even dropping too. So this is definitely something to watch, and I feel like it's something we should keep in mind, for the coming weeks. And I definitely, if I had to predict, I would say for the top four making it a playoffs right now, I would definitely say Amar is making it. This is a tough one. I'd say Amar, Wajih are two that I definitely think are making it. 3 and 4 is completely wide open. If Ali ends up continuing his losing streak, he could just completely bounce out of the playoffs. But I'm gonna bet on myself. I'm gonna say I'm gonna be one of the third teams, and then fourth. I don't know. I feel like it could be anyone between Ali, Salik, Daniel, uh, and obviously Abbas, because Abbas has been looking good, but he's playing Wajih this week, and I feel like that might be a loss. But let's see. Yeah. So this covers the standings. I definitely want to hear what you guys think and who the top four will end up being. Moving back to our last segment for today, it is Shaqtin a Fool. If I could get a drum roll, please. I know no one is here to give me a drum roll, but we're gonna roll with it anyways. So our Shaqtin a Fool for this week is none other than Sami Himmati. Unfortunately, I have to put him on this list because he barely broke the 100-point mark. It was a tough matchup for him going up against Daniel, who nearly scored 200 points this week, putting up a solid 176 points, meaning, Sami lost by almost as much as he scored, 74 points total. Unfortunately, he had some players on his team. Strictly speaking, the New York New York defense, Garrett Wilson and Jerick McKinnon combining for a whopping 5 points. That's not something you want to see. Or sorry, not even 5 points. It's 3.6 points. That's ridiculous. Jerick McKinnon scoring 1, Garrett Wilson scoring 3, and his Giants defense giving him -1 point. It's a tough one. I just feel like it's been a tough season for Sami, and get ready for your punishment. That's all I gotta say. Um, yeah, this has been our podcast for the week. I hope you guys enjoyed the solo show. I do know we have a few more people that are still able to join that have not joined us on the podcast. I'm looking forward to, maybe contacting you guys and having you join. Hopefully next week as well, we'll have Wajih coming back in, and things will go back to your regularly scheduled program. I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast, and thanks again for listening to all of these. I really appreciate it. And always let us know if there's any feedback you have, or if you think there's anything we can do to improve. Let us know, and hopefully we'll even have a live podcast one of these days. Thanks again. Talk to you later, guys.